مساء الخير وأهلا وسهلا بكم في أحدث لقاءات لمركز حلول للسياسات البديلة. هفكركم بس من فضلكم تقفلوا موبايلاتكم احتراما للسادة المتحدثين، وأسيب اللقاء تحت إدارة الأستاذ خالد العرب الأستاذ المشارك بقسم الصحافة والإعلام بالجامعة الأمريكية. أستاذ خالد.
شكرا جزيلا يا أستاذ سهى، وأهلا بكم جميعا لهذه الندوة من تنظيم حلول للسياسات البديلة، المشروع البحثي التابع للجامعة الأمريكية. الندوة بيتم بثها مباشرة المفروض على فيسبوك لايف ستريمينج، وبالتالي سيشرفنا مشاركة الحضور في القاعة وكذلك مشاركة الحضور أو المتابعين من خلال صفحة مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي أو فيسبوك تحديدا بالأسئلة بعد كلمات المتحدثين. يعني سيكون هناك إن شاء الله وقت في نهاية الندوة لتلقي أسئلة من السادة الحضور في القاعة ومن المتابعين على فيسبوك. يعني أدعوكم لمتابعة حسابات حلول للسياسات البديلة على مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي فيسبوك وتويتر وإنستغرام للاطلاع على الفعاليات التي يتم تنظيمها من هذا المشروع البحثي في الجامعة الأمريكية. هناك ترجمة فورية من العربية للإنجليزية وبالعكس، وبالتالي بإمكان السادة الحضور والمتابعين كذلك على فيسبوك متابعة الندوة باللغتين بأي من اللغتين. طيب، عنوان الندوة اليوم هو: هل التحول العادل للطاقة في العالم العربي قابل للتطبيق؟ ويعني أعتقد أنه طبعا يعني ده جاي في إطار الاستعداد لاستقبال مصر لقمة المناخ كوب 27 في شرم الشيخ، واللي بتشهد يعني الأيام دي بتشهد زخم وتركيز في الخطاب العام، تركيز محمود على ما أعتقد يعني في الخطاب العام على مسألة التغير المناخي. لكن السؤال اللي بتطرحه الندوة اليوم هو سؤال مش من الأسئلة المتكررة كتير، يعني من الموضوعات اللي غير مطروقة كثيرا. عادة بنركز لما بنتكلم على التغير المناخي بنركز على إمكانية التحول لسياسات طاقة نظيفة، لكن السؤال هو طب مين بيدفع ثمن ده وبيدفعه إزاي، والأعباء دي ممكن تتوزع بأي شكل؟ ده سؤال ليس يعني لا يطرح كثيرا، وأنا سعيد الحقيقة أني ضيوفنا الأفاضل اليوم سيتطرقون لهذه المسألة. نتشرف كثيرا بوجود السادة المتحدثين: دكتور أمين بنونة، أستاذ الفيزياء بجامعة القاضي عياد في مراكش بالمغرب، وهو له باع طويل ليس فقط في العمل البحثي والأكاديمي والذي حاز فيه على عدة جوائز، ولكن كذلك في تخطيط السياسات، سياسات الطاقة، وفي صناعة يعني خبرة عملية في قطاع صناعة الطاقة في المغرب. والدكتور محمد السبكي، الأستاذ المتفرغ بتخطيط أنظمة الطاقة بكلية الهندسة بجامعة القاهرة، وأيضا هو صاحب باع طويل أكاديمي وكذلك عملي. كان رئيسا لهيئة الطاقة الجديدة والمتجددة، وكذلك مركز بحوث الطاقة وجهاز مرفق تنظيم الكهرباء وحماية المستهلك، وله أيضا خبرة في المجلس الاستشاري العربي لمنظمي الكهرباء. والدكتور حافظ السلماوي، أستاذ الهندسة الطاقة بكلية الهندسة بجامعة الزقازيق، الذي كان أيضا رئيسا لجهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء وحماية المستهلك، وكان رئيسا لتجمع منظمي الطاقة لدول حوض المتوسط، وشارك في وضع قانون الكهرباء هنا في مصر، كما شارك في تطوير برامج الطاقة المتجددة في عدد من الدول بخلاف مصر. نتشرف بوجود سياداتكم معنا اليوم، ونبدأ بكلمات السادة المتحدثين. الدكتور أمين بنونة، إذا تتكرم بأن تبدأ بكلماتك في اللقاء. شكرا. زي ما لا البرزنتيشن في ده ممكن نستعمله. تحب حضرتك تقعد هنا؟ اوكي عشان نشوف. اوكي
If you don't mind, I will make my presentation in English. I'm not used to speak in public in English because simply I'm not used. In Morocco, we used to give all scientific courses in French, as it happens here, most of the cases in English. So the common part is English, and we are in the American university. So. Can we have the first slide, my presentation? Oh, it's there. Okay. We'll just do, in the first part, a quick overview of what's Morocco and the Moroccan balance sheets, what is in the national, what is in the national accounting, and we'll take care today with all what is not in the national accounts. You know, all this invisible energy, which includes, for instance, all the pumps bought by farmers, you know, to irrigate their farm. And also all these people who have solar kits to electrify the house, of course, but this was before 2005, because today we are like Egypt. Egypt is a strip country in terms of electricity. All the people are living around the Nile, and when you put just a high voltage wire along the Nile, and you can give electricity to everybody. This is not the case of Morocco. We don't have the Nile. We don't have one big river. We have a lot of very poor rivers. Morocco doesn't took the advantage of what Algeria has recovered after the independence, because France was there for 130 years, and they made all the people living around come to villages. They have imposed a kind of rural urbanism to control better people. They removed them from their place, their farms, their houses, their villages, to a kind of central village to have control on the population. In this condition, electrify the people is easier. In Morocco, we had a completely different situation. We have 42,000 villages, and we have the same situation of 42,000 villages, even with 20 million of inhabitants. The average per household is 50 people per village. This is the situation we had. Now, even with that, we have 99% of access of electricity in rural areas in Morocco. This was very expensive, but we go ahead. We'll start with this. Let's say a brief overview of Moroccan energy balances. Quickly, sorry, some slides, I had time enough to update them, but not to translate them. So you have it till 2021, but it's in French, but it's not difficult, you know. It's charbon is carbon, and petrol, you can understand it, natural gas, electricity. So in the left, you see the primary energy. And you see that petroleum is the most important part of the primary energy consumption in Morocco. But its share, it's going decreasing slightly, and progressively what is lost in petroleum is taken by renewable electricity, while the share of coal is there almost the same since 1980. Sorry. In the right side, you see the same number. I mean, this is the energy consumption in Morocco, but it's the final energy. What's the difference? The difference is that in the left, you find all the coal consumption of the country, while in the right, the coal transformed as electricity is not there, because you have electricity. And you see there that electricity is the major part. It's in orange. And that coal is a minority part, because most of the coal is transformed electricity. And what is interesting, try to remember this kind of scheme. We'll find it in other slides. The final energy consumption in Morocco went from, let's say, 5 million tons equivalent petroleum to 23 million in 2021. You can see the 2020 there. You see it's below the average curve, obviously, for the reasons all of us know. And I don't like expressing exponentials. Exponential, I'm afraid by exponential formulas. You know, exponential is something that just like goes, increases. I like to express percentages from one year to another, but I don't like to extrapolate this to tomorrow, because it's just frightening.
Sorry, Dr. Bennouna, can I please ask everyone to put their phones on silent so that the presentation is not interrupted? Thank you very much.
Was a problem?
No, just the phones.
Okay. And you see that the increase, the yearly increase, climbed up to almost 5% between 1990 and 2000, and it's decreasing slowly to 3% in the recent period. Now here you will see what is the national share of this energy. And the national share of energy is shown on the left. So the imported part is in red. Morocco has been dependent almost all the time on imports. And the share of imports is shown in red. And I was ashamed to put a zero. The curve starts at 85%, meaning that 85% we were almost all the time dependent more than 85%. And the green part is the local renewable energy. The blue, it's almost invisible. It's industrial heat, meaning that in chemistry, in phosphates chemistry, sometimes we produce sulfuric acid and sometimes phosphoric acid, and in this transformation you can recover energy to produce electricity. So finally, Morocco is a very dependent country, and this means that Morocco is the bill of these is strongly dependent on not only the local market, but also the international market, and you can see it on the right. The blue part, the histogram, is the bill, the energy bill of the country. It climbs up to, the figures here are in million dirham, Moroccan dirhams. You just divide by 10 and you get the bill in dollars. So in blue, it's the bill. And in red, it's the percentage of the gross national income. So our energy bill climbs sometimes up to 13%, 1/3 of the income. Too much, too heavy. And hopefully, one day, somebody woke up and said that, hey, we have no petroleum, we have no coal, or at least the coal we have is not good. It's full of sulfur. It's just a poison. It's just a poison because when we use it, it falls on us with the acid rains. We just left it there where it is. And you see, what you see here is the energy of local energies with S. I include here the small amount of coal before 2000, the small amount of natural gas, petroleum, and renewables. And you see that after 2010, it started increasing. That is where the energy transition stands. You have seen that the percentage still of the energy, the renewable energy, is small in the country. But something started in 2010, and it is due to the national policy on renewables, obviously. But it is still not enough. But some university professors, among which I was, we are speaking about renewables since 1990, 1985. And I don't know why they discovered this 2008. I know, obviously, Morocco found no gas, no natural gas. The coal was abandoned. Obviously, the only thing we had was sun and wind. Morocco has 3,500 kilometers of coast, among which almost 2,500 of the Atlantic. And we have these Alizés wind in the south, which are very stable, which is very interesting. Now, last one about this is the electricity demand. Obviously, with this rural electrification program we had, which in Egypt you didn't have recently, it was a long time ago, you see that the electricity increase is very important because of this rural electrification. Not because rural people consume a lot of electricity. No, because simply there were 12 million Moroccans without electricity 30 years ago. Not 30, sorry, 25. 12 million people without access to electricity. In a country at that time, we were only about 24 million. Half of the people had no way to have electricity. Today, I would say just a small number. We have almost 100% access to electricity in the country. But 85% only have electricity. But that is another problem. That's a poverty problem. And that's a social problem and not an electricity problem. People cannot afford it or are afraid by the cost of connecting to the grid. And you know, once you are connected to the grid, at the beginning you just want a lamp and watch television. Obviously, television is a huge driver for rural electrification. But after that, the wife wants a fridge. And after the fridge comes the washing machine. And most of the cases, the money is not there to buy all this stuff and to pay the electricity bill for that. And some people don't have electricity because they are afraid about what it would cost after. I was just joking about this wife, but you know what I mean. Now, the electricity demand at the input of the grid climbed up to 7% increase yearly, but nowadays it's going to 0 and almost 1%, bit less than 1%. Per inhabitant, it's 0 because the increase of population in Morocco is almost between 0.8 and 1% per year. Meaning, and in fact, well, I'm not going to show you here, the electricity sales per inhabitant is almost stable. Now, we had a description, quick description of what happens in Morocco with energy and electricity. Now, as we are going to speak about solar, this is the horizontal solar radiation average per day. Expression is in watt hours per square meter per day. And you see that even if the north-south extension of Morocco is not as long as Egypt, but it's quite long, 2,500. It's shown like this, it looks like Egypt or Chile. It's quite straight and long towards south. And in the right, you see the tilted at 30 degrees radiation. And you see that the differences, even if the green contrasts a lot with the red, in fact, the difference is not that high, because even on the right, you see that the minimum is at 5,200 and the maximum is at 6,900. Okay, it's not that important. And even for PV, for photovoltaics, when you add the fact that cold zones of Morocco are favored for photovoltaics, while hot regions of Morocco, the productivity is less, and then it makes a difference between north and south even smaller. So what makes that Morocco, like Egypt, by the way, is a good place for big solar plants? Not because solar radiation. I think our scheme is almost the same than yours, and probably that you have some places in the extreme south that are even better than these. But because of access. Because in the south of Libya, there are places which are much better than these and yours. But what about access? What about people living? There's nobody there, and it's not secure. Okay, I have seen some bit less than 18 years ago. I went to the south of Libya, and they have seen these people going with huge trucks with arms to protect the goods they are transporting to the south of Libya. These parts of Africa, from the Sahelian part to the southern part, between Sudan and Egypt, between Libya and Chad, between all these places are not secure at all. And access is a good thing, because when you have a solar plant, you have people to handle it, okay? And these people, it happens that they have wives, families. They want to put their kids at school. They want to have a hospital. You have to have this facility there. And it's not sustainable to put a solar plant in the middle of nowhere and to bring only people that are not married to make it work. It's not sustainable, no way. So places where you put these big solar plants have to be accessible, and people should be able to live there. Now, we'll go to just a quick overview of what is PV and solar thermal in Morocco. Yes. You have here numbers in this part we'll use essentially logarithmic scales, because if we don't use logarithmic scale, all what is on the left is going to be too small. Just quickly, the top you have in blue, always blue referred to the left scale and red to the right scale, okay? In blue, it's the PV, the PV in megawatts. No, it's a mistake. It's not in megawatts. No, sorry. PV in the world, not in Morocco. We are not still in the next one. PV in the world in megawatts. So it went from 570 megawatts in 1980 to about 760,000 megawatts on 2020. And the share of Morocco in this business was about up to 4% in the 90s. You know why? Simply because we had no access to electricity. And people in the rural side had no other way to have lights, bulbs, and watch television without electricity. So Morocco, even with a 0.1% of the world population at that time, was taking 4% of the share of the market PV market in the world. And it went down to 0.0%, simply because Morocco was electrified and PV was still expensive. And after that, PV prices went down and the Moroccan share started to climb. The graph in the bottom shows the same numbers, but in square meters for solar thermal to heat water. Worldwide, the total amount of square meters went from 25 million square meters to 740 square meters. And the share of Morocco, you see, was always around 0.1%. We'll see in the next graph, a graph which will show you that Egypt is much better than Morocco, for at least for this part. Even Palestine, even Cyprus, a lot of people have much more solar heaters than Morocco. Here we see the level of equipment. So to compare different countries together, the best way for PV is to put the amount of installed peak watts per capita. And for solar thermal, to put the number of square meters per inhabitant. And you see that the average of the world is climbed to 18 peak watts per inhabitant, global average. And the Moroccan share was, yes, Morocco was 24, while the worldwide average was in 18. I don't know, I don't remember exactly where Egypt stands for these numbers. I know those for solar thermal. In the lower graph, you see the same thing, but this time in square meters per 1,000 inhabitants. So the blue is for the world, and the red is for Morocco. You see that we are, let's say, 3-4 times, almost 4 times below the world average. In this part of the world, I mean the Western Mediterranean, the situation is much better than Morocco. Tunisia is better than Morocco. Of course, Libya, Algeria are absent for obvious reasons, but Cyprus is much better than Morocco. Greece is better than Morocco. Palestine is better than Morocco. Lebanon is better than Morocco. So now we go to the decentralized part. We have seen all the solar thermal part and all the PV, all the Moroccan market. Now we'll focus only in the part, the solar thermal, we'll keep it as it is because it is, all of them are independent from the grid, even if sometimes electricity is used to, to complete the temperature. And PV, we take only those who are not PV, which is not in the big plants to feed the grid. And to understand what is happening, it's important to have the prices in mind. The upper graph, starting from now, everything will always have PV on the top and solar thermal in the bottom. You see the prices here. These are the Moroccan prices, but all of you probably know already these kind of graphs expressed in dollars or in euros. That are the prices CIF, cost, insurance, freight, to Morocco in dirhams per peak watt, meaning that you have to divide this by almost 10 to have it in dollars. And you see that, it was more than 80 dirhams per peak watt in 1990, and it is almost half of a dollar today, less than half of a dollar today. While for solar thermal, the change was very slow. It reduced, but less than 0.5% per year, which is irrelevant. What I mean that people like me, who have some white hair and big age, have seen this kind of solar collectors sold at the same price 30 years ago, 35, 40 years ago than today. I remember that in Morocco, you could buy a good solar collector with a good tank, a good brand from Australia or United States or whatever. You could buy this kind of stuff for almost $1,200 at that time, and it's still the same price today, 30 years later. Okay, now let's see what's happening with the PV installations on the top and annual solar thermal. So in blue, it's the cumulative, and in black, it is the market. You see that the PV market was increasing, still increasing, till mid-90s, okay? And it stopped increasing till the beginning of 2000, and it started increasing again. The first part on your left is due to rural electrification, and the right part is due to grid-connected electricity. People put in their house, inject electricity to self-consume, self-produce part of their consumption, or to feed up pumps for irrigation. While you can see that solar thermal, there was no revolution, a kind of continuous increase, but very slow increase. You see that the market went from 4,000 square meters per year to 70,000. It's a multiplication by almost 15, 16. While solar PV went from 0.01 to 199. The logarithmic scale is not nice. It doesn't show the increases, but the fact is that if you don't put it logarithmic, then you don't see what is small. Now, what is important, what is the impact of this? PV is above, solar thermal is in the bottom. Now, how much electricity we saved with this decentralized electricity produced by PV? We have saved something like 8,067 gigawatt hours per year. And this represented something like 2% of the national grid electricity. Of course, this doesn't go to the grid, okay? But that number represented in 2018 2%. Solar thermal, most of Moroccans don't use electric water heaters. Most of Moroccans use butane gas heaters to heat electricity simply because butane is subsidized. But, in fact, those who have solar, in fact, are people who want hot water under pressure, because you know that gas butane, you can get the butane heaters, you cannot get the same pressure than with electricity. And most of the competitor of solar heaters is not butane. It is electricity. So those who use solar heaters don't use, when they produce solar energy, they avoid electricity consumption. And from this point of view, you have the 451 gigawatt hours per year generated by the solar heaters are the equivalent of 1.2% or have saved 1.2% of the electricity of the country.
دكتور
أسرع. Okay, these are greenhouse gases. Same thing for solar thermal and PV. Solar thermal down and PV over there. And this is what happens for the peak power at noon. Because it's true that the impact of energy is small, because solar energy is generated only during the day. But as it works only during the day, let's see what happens at noon. Because in Morocco, like in your country, like almost all the countries worldwide, we have two peaks. In most of the cases, the demand increases at noon, and that is due to professional demand of electricity. And then around 5 o'clock, it goes down, and there is another peak around 8 or 9 o'clock, depending on the social uses of each country, because of domestic uses. And it's important to know what happens at noon. I used to say to my student that we are going to become fair with blue eyes. You don't know why, simply because Morocco had a night peak, which was bigger than the noon peak. But the night peak is decreasing and the noon peak is increasing, meaning that we are going to be German in few years, or like German. That's why we should probably, if you come here in 5 years, I would become fair with blue eyes. Well, the peak demand is reduced by 12% of this energy, which is not in the balance sheet. This doesn't exist. Okay, you can search, you will not find. And 12% it represents 700, almost 800 megawatts. Hey, 800 megawatts. That's that's a quite almost half of, you know, you have heard about Zaporizhzhia this last year, right? Okay, Zaporizhzhia has five reactors. One of them is about 800 megawatts. All this invisible energy represents almost that. Thank you.
Thank you for a fascinating presentation, Dr. Amin. It was really, really insightful and gave an excellent overview of the situation in Morocco. I will move ahead directly to Dr. Mohamed Elsobki to give his presentation.
Okay. Well, I'll speak bilingual, a little bit of Arabic and a little bit of English. I'll speak about the electricity market in Egypt in the past, as well as in the current and the potential future, as related to also the development of renewables and the development of the market structure. هتكلم الأول in the past, the electricity market in the past was primarily handled by the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energies, as well as the Egyptian Electricity Holding Company. It was composed of It was primarily composed of generator, transmission, and distribution companies. We had 6 generating utilities, 1 transmission company, and 9 distribution companies. All are state-owned, as well as a source of renewable energies, also state-owned, but not under the umbrella of the electricity holding company. We had a number of end users, primarily at the ultra-high voltage and extra-high voltage. See if the pointer is working. Okay, high voltage customers and a little bit of medium voltage customers, and they are actually consuming around 25% of the electricity handled in the country, but they are only order of 105 end users. While on the low voltage side and the medium voltage side, we have currently 37 million customers, end users, who are dealing with 75% of the electricity in the country. Primarily, the market model is what we call the single buyer model. The single buyer model is composed of the main buyer of electricity from all the generation is the transmission company, and as was indicated, it's one transmission company from north to south in Egypt, and they operate at the high voltage and extra high voltage. And then so they sell electricity to the distribution utilities as well as some of the end users. We had our first introduction of single or private investors in the market in the recent history. In the 1990s, we had 3 build, own, operate, and transfer generation utilities. At the beginning, they were primarily owned by France, EDF, and Intergen of the United States and England, and now they are owned by PowerTech. PowerTech is a Malaysian company which is also currently all its assets is owned by Chinese investors. And why I'm putting it in that rectangle, yellow rectangle, because they competed at the very beginning. These companies are still there, about at the end of their lifetime and about to be transferred back to the state in 1 year's time. The idea of having renewable energies to the left circle here was primarily started in 1986 with the new and renewable energy authority in order to have market knowledge, to gain knowledge of the renewable energy technologies and so on, and they were primarily wind. And we started with 5 kilowatt wind turbines, and that grew now to about 2,500, 2.5 gigawatts of renewable wind turbines now. Today, our share of renewables in the country, based on the Egyptian regulatory announcement on daily basis, we are speaking about an order of 12 to 14%. So each one of us at our homes, factories, shops, and so on, are utilizing 14% in our electricity mix from renewables. So we can all claim that we are 14% green, in a way. Not blue. You know, but that includes about 6 to 7% of hydro, and the remaining is from wind and solar. There was some very limited number of cases where unfortunately the pointer is not responding to me, but anyway, there was few exchange of electricity between some of the end users and back to the transmission company. Can you help me with that? So some of the end users generated electricity and they sold it back to the grid, and that was on the transmission level from some of the high voltage users. And the exports and imports between Egypt, Jordan, Egypt, Libya, and Egypt, Sudan, that's primarily Egypt, Jordan, is less than 1% currently. In the late 90s, in the mid-90s, we had some demands growing, especially around the Red Sea and the Sinai area, where resort activities and so on, basically touristic activities, were asking for electricity, and the state at the time said, I'm not able to give you electricity. The grid does not extend from the Nile area to the east of Egypt. So at that time, we started the idea of the independent power producers, or the independent service providers. They provided electricity to these end users at the Red Sea area and so on. And they tried to sell electricity to high voltage customers, but somehow, I'll comment on that in a few minutes, they were not able to compete with the cost of service provided by the state. So most of the all the large-scale consumers or users were only getting their electricity from the transmission company or the single buyer model. This idea of the independent service providers, no, sorry. Okay, this idea of the independent service providers did extend, and we had first around the early 2000s the idea of having independent service providers to the upper right, as you can see, who are independent and selling electricity to end users at the voltage, at the low voltage and medium voltage. And they were primarily buying electricity either from the transmission company or from the distribution companies or having their own generation. And they were able to compete even in Cairo city. They were able to compete against state-owned distribution utilities, and they did win. After that, started the idea of we need to increase our share of renewables, and that was in around the 2012, 2013, and that was the first set of rules and regulations set by the Egyptian Electricity Regulatory Agency, and the first legislation addressing renewable energies at the time, aside from the state-owned, was setting the net metering legislation to be able for end users to have their own electricity at their own site, as well as to sell any additional electricity to the grid. So, yeah. At the time, again, in that sense, and I would like to comment here, is it's not engineering, it's not financial. I'll pose a question here now, and I'll tell you why I'm saying it's not engineering and it's not financial. When are you born? You are only born when you have a birth certificate. So this is a legislation. You are only an engineer, an accountant, a lawyer, or something like that until you are not that until you have your certificate. So it's another legislation. Even if we are not dead, we are not dead until we have our death certificate, شهادة الوفاة. It's all legislation. It's all legislation. And this is when Egypt era, the Egyptian Electricity Regulatory Agency, started with having these new private entities providing electricity to ensure are harmonized, no monopolies in the market for the electricity. In 2014, actually October and December 2014, that was our sort of leap or major move to renewable energies. In 2014, we had issued our current constitution. Our current constitution was announced at that here, and it states very clearly in Article 32 of that legislation that the state is committed for the development of renewable energies as projects as well as in the research area. So that was the big umbrella stating that renewables are important in the market. And at the time, the Ministry of Electricity changed its name from Ministry of Electricity and Energy to Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energies. It's just symbolic to indicate the importance of renewable energies in the country. In 2014, the first law addressing the development of renewable energies was issued in December, and it stated four plus one schemes. Four schemes, they are the EPC scheme, which is primarily engineering, procurement, and construction, and handled by the state. The BOO scheme, which is handled by private sector, and sort of the jewel of the crown was the feed-in tariff. feed-in tariff followed around 70 countries or 72 countries in the world applying the feed-in tariff. And that was a real turnover. And we accomplished doing this around 1465 megawatts of renewable energies from solar. Wind, we were not able to achieve any under this feed-in tariff because of some long schedules for monitoring and assessing the resources and so on. And the fourth scheme was the independent power producer scheme, which allows a provider of electricity to supply me with electricity at my home, at my factory, and so on, through the network without, not under the single buyer model, that we can have a direct relation and utilize the networks. This somehow is still under development. Slow development, but it is under development. And another scheme which was not exercised until today, which is the quota scheme, where the state do have the right to apply to enforce certain percentages of use of renewables primarily for end users and also for suppliers. So the state can say, have in your electricity mix 3% or 4% of renewables. So it forces the end user to look for developers for renewable energy. This quota scheme is still not implemented. All the schemes, all the net metering, the EPC, the FIT, the BOO scheme, as well as the IPP scheme, are basically schemes to encourage the production of electricity from renewable energies. So it's basically a pushing scheme. That needs to be complemented with someone helping to pull the rules and to pull the implementation. And that is primarily the quota scheme. But this is still, we are not at this stage yet. We started having also independent power producers from renewables in the market under these schemes, and the following step is, now it doesn't want to show. Okay. Then we have now between the supply side and the end user side a direct relation. These arrows, the brown dark arrow is basically that we have direct relation between suppliers and end users and utilizing the grid. In that sense, Egypt ERA did, the electricity regulator did issue what we call wheeling charges to cover the cost of the grid. And under this, we have currently now four contracts, direct contracts between suppliers and end users. They are to grow. This dotted green one is the anticipation for the future that we'll have direct relations between suppliers, renewable energy suppliers, and end users between different suppliers and different end users. These end users can be individual end users and can be utilities. A renewable energy supplier can supply electricity to a renewable or disco. It's only one slide. And so these dotted green arrows are the potential future which we are currently trying to work on to develop a competitive market. If this takes place, and in addition to having potential IPP expansion with existing utilities, existing generation utilities, where investors can participate with state-owned utilities in their activities, then at that stage, we'll have no need to the rectangle, the yellow rectangle which I had. It vanished, and we don't have to separate between state-owned and private sector-owned as long as there will be based on the real market values and so on. Hopefully, we can reach this stage soon. We can reach it in a way, we can reach it within months, and we can reach it within years. The electricity law, Dr. Hafez is smiling, the electricity law states since the start of the electricity law in 2015 that this transition or this competitive status, we need we were targeting to reach that in 8 years by next year. But somehow an extension of another 3 years did take place. But again, what I'm trying to say here, that we cherish the sun, we cherish the renewables. Since 7,000 years in our temples, in Maadi, in Frank Schumann project for water irrigation, and so on. But we still cherish the sun until today. I'll give you just an example. This last picture here to the right is a picture of a simple PVs, but you know where it's installed? It's installed in Al-Amariya fruit and vegetable market. So they are thinking of adding this renewable tag to their product, saying that renewable energies were there in their production chain. So again, I keep on saying we will keep on cherishing the sun, and hopefully that will that concludes my presentation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohamed, and it's a challenging and an amazing task to summarize the complicated Egyptian market in one slide, but you've done it in a very...
It's a click of a button on the computer. We can change the market as quickly as that.
Thank you very much. I'll move directly to Dr. Hafez.
Actually, maybe first I would like to thank, yes. I have very loud voice, so I might not need a microphone. But yes, okay. Actually, the missed slide, which is the title page, basically I pose it as a question for energy transition and how Egypt's strategy has took energy transition into consideration when the strategy is being developed. Because currently, go forward. Forward. Yes. Okay. Okay. Actually, I posed a question about what's energy transition exactly, and how the Egypt energy strategy will consider this into the strategy, because currently there is an activity for updating the energy strategy of Egypt from energy strategy of Egypt till 2035 to Egypt energy strategy till 2040. I will talk about first what's energy transition, and then what's the institutional setup of the Egyptian energy sector. And basically we have a general strategy for the country, which is a socioeconomic development strategy, which is called the Sustainable Development Strategy. And we have energy strategy. So basically the energy strategy is under the socioeconomic development strategy for 2030. And then driver for the update of the energy strategy, why we need to update our energy strategy. And update of comprehensive renewable master plan, because this is one of the base documents which need to be first developed before developing an energy strategy, because this is identify potentials of renewable energy in the country. And then I will talk about new demand sectors, what sectors which is now growing and have a demand which was not considered in the 2035 strategy, because this has been recently being introduced and become an important sector. And then what's the reference scenario for the energy strategy, and green hydrogen. All of us heard many about green hydrogen. What's the prospects of green hydrogen in future, and final conclusions. This is a very complicated, but it shows that what could be the drivers and what's this driver leading to. Basically, usually the first driver of any country when they set a kind of a strategy, they talk about security of supply. Number one. Europe now talk about security of supply, although the main driver in Europe was just 1 year ago was basically environment for developing their energy strategy, but now they are talking security of supply. So security of supply usually come first, but for sure environment is very much important. Cost predictability. Actually, it's very much important for economists and planner to have a kind of a vision about how prices of energy will be developed in future in order to set their plan. So they usually prefer to have a higher cost predictability for the energy. So as you could improve cost predictability, this will help the planner to set more accurate plans in future. Advances in technology. As Dr. Amin mentioned, that technology has been advanced specifically in solar energy. Wind energy maybe was a little bit closer to maturity, but specifically solar energy and some other new types of energy. So, and especially prices also, these advances in technology lead to reduction in prices. Climate change, for sure, climate change is a very much important dimension when an energy strategy, because 80% of the climate change is attributed to energy consumption. So basically, climate change is very much important. Attracting investment, because most countries has realized that a state couldn't build or couldn't provide energy, or the state couldn't be the sole provider of energy, and it should rely on private sector and attracting international investment. International best practices, a lot of experiences like what we heard in Morocco, in the region, internationally, has been developed over the previous year, so an energy planner should take into consideration this. Best service to the consumer, you will need to improve service to the customers. Low cost and maturity of renewable energy. Renewable energy in specific has cost has been reduced. Just to give an example, PV prices has been reduced by 77% over the last 10 years only. Socioeconomic impact of the energy. So this was usually the driver for an energy planner. What it usually leads? It leads for security of supply is very much important to have a diversification, which is also when you look at the Repower EU plan recently is basically diversification, to diversify supply sources. So basically, it's a diversification. When you talk about climate change, you talk about decarbonization. When you talk about also improving service to consumers or talk about higher share of renewable energy, you talk about digitalization, because now the grid become more complicated, and the old pattern for operating a grid where the supply side is basically goes or following the demand. Now we talk about demand who will follow the supply, because you don't have much control on the supply, as renewable energy come during some times and other times not available, specifically when we talk about chaotic kind of energies like wind energy, for example. So you need digitalization. Electrification. Now a lot of technologies came, like electric mobility or EV cars, which is now coming and become a very affordable technology. So electrification in many sectors is taking place. market reform, as Dr. Sobki mentioned, which is main drive by attracting investments, sector integrations, which has been improved. That's very much important. At the beginning, you have a parallel sector. You have supply of fuel and you have car-consuming fuel. You have supply of gas and you have industry using gas. You have supply of electricity and consumer using electricity. But now we're going to have, instead of this parallel type of sectors, we're going to have a circular type sector where you have one grid which could supply cars, could supply industry, could supply any other uses, households. Because electrification with electricity make more need for sector integration. So, and as we were going to see also for energy, water, and food nexus. So it's basically energy sectors integration becomes important. Regional integration, because introduction of renewable energy and opening market made a need for have much regional integration to provide better security of supply for all participants, as well as a kind of support between different grids due to the variation of supply which is coming from renewable energy, which is a variable kind of supply. Economic stability. You need price predictability to ensure economic stability. So basically, this is the objectives of a market transition, which is to diversify, to decarbonize, to digitize, to electrify, market reform, sector integration, regional integration, and achieving economic stability. So how Egypt responded to that? Basically, to understand first how the energy sector works in Egypt, we have usually 4 levels within the energy sector. We have the strategic level, where we have in Egypt what we call the Supreme Council of Energy, which is basically a kind of a minor cabinet, in addition to some other entities, because it's considered from perspective as a national security also. So basically, this Supreme Council, where the strategy is being approved. Then we have ministries responsible for energy, including Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy, as well as we have demand ministries, Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Housing and Building, Ministry of Industries. So this is where policies is being developed. So this is a policy level within the strategic level which has been set. We have a regulatory level where the laws and strategy is transformed into regulations. So what to do and what not to do. So basically, we have Egypt ERA, which is a regulatory agency for the electricity sector, and we have a gas regulator for the gas sector, but we don't yet have a full hydrocarbon regulator for liquid fuel. Still, we have EGPC, which is the General Petroleum Corporation, El-Salmawy Petrol, and EGAS doing a kind, specific EGPC, doing a kind of regulation for liquid fuels, but basically it's have a conflict of interest. It's partial partnership in some production side, as well as it's doing regulations. Then we have service providers. We have upstream, midstream, lower stream, storage, importers, transmitters. This is in the oil and gas sector. And we have generation, transmission, and distribution in the electricity sector. This is what has been mentioned in the energy pillar in the Egypt Sustainable Development Strategy, which is, shows that we should have an energy sector able to respond and satisfy the need of Egypt energy with a maximum efficiency and use or maximize use of renewable energy as well as other resources of energy. And it should contribute to the economic growth, and looking forward for Egypt to become a regional leader in the energy development sector, as we look for Egypt to become an energy hub within the region. as well as energy sector become innovative sector and capable for forecasting and adapting, which means that improve resilience of the energy sector to face any kind of crisis, as well as to be innovative and able to respond to any changes. This is what the target which has been considered in the strategy, which still holds same almost in strategy 2035 for energy strategy, which is basically 4 main pillars: energy security, which we usually mention, sustainability, which is energy use per GDP should be lower to make the economy much less energy intensive, because we have an energy intensive economy. To grow 1% in the economy, we need to grow our energy supply by 1%, which is too high compared to other economies. Also, in institutional and corporate governance, we need to enhance our institutional setup, as well as improve the governance of our sector. And as Dr. Ezzelarab mentioned, go for competitive market to improve efficiency of supply and reduce prices. This is different scenarios, and a kind of a multi-criteria decision analysis has been carried in order to find different scenarios, and it has been decided that scenario 4B on the top right, which is the scenario which is being considered, because when you do an analysis, you might find some criteria, some of the scenarios are better, other is much less, but you need to take a decision. So you do a kind of an analysis, and this is that scenario 4B has been decided. What's scenario 4B? Scenario 4B basically is saying that prices by 2025 will be achieving cost of supply, so no more subsidy. Second, maybe this is a little bit challenging so far with the devaluation so far of Egyptian currency, but still this is one of the target. Target is that it's a least cost model, which means that we will allow all technologies to compete based on their cost of supply. Also, it includes that nuclear energy will be a part of the mix, and we will follow a proactive energy efficiency kind of consumption for high energy efficiency. So we have 8 indicators which shows each scenarios how much respond to these 8 indicators. Red is bad and green is good, dark green is good. So the Supreme Council decided that scenario 4B will be the scenario which will take place. This is the outcome which shows that usually we usually hear from many people in the electricity sector that 42% of electricity will come from renewable energy. So it shows here that we need around 21 gigawatt of PV, 14 gigawatt of wind, and 5 gigawatt of CSP, and we have around 2 gigawatt of hydro, and 58% will come from conventional, so around 42 will come from renewable energy. This was projected. But most importantly, if you look to the top figure, it shows that coal was planned to play a role, because when the strategy developed at 2015, practically there was severe shortage in gas supply, and there was no assurance that there will be a resources for gas supply. So based on the least cost, it shows that coal could play a role in the energy mix of Egypt, which is against the idea of decarbonization. So this is the content of the scenario 4B. Now we have some drivers which need for us to develop or upgrade our strategy. We have technology development and cost reduction. So when we was talking 2015, we was talking about around $14 per kilowatt hour generated from solar energy. Now we talk about less than 2. So it's basically prices has dropped tremendously. So when we talk about least cost analysis, so for sure the share of renewable energy will be now higher. Vulnerability of international fossil fuel prices. There is a much turbulence now in the international fuel prices. This was basically predicted before even the crisis, which is going nowadays. But even that, nowadays, the vulnerability is much higher because we have a very big consumers now getting into the market who was relying on supplier, and now there is a trend in the international market to put aside the two largest producers of gas in the world, Russia and Iran. So basically this leads to a kind of very high vulnerability specifically for natural gas. Behavior of other players in international market, sure, as I mentioned, when a big consumer like EU get into the market, prices will go higher. Paris Agreement, actually this has been ratified or signed or issued even December 2015 after the issuance of the strategy, and Egypt ratified in 2017, so become committed to the 2 degrees of before the end of this century, and targeting 1.5 degree. COVID-19, which shows that how the system, energy system should be resilient in order to face such kind of change, and other factors like development in regional market, availability of energy interconnection, now it's become much more appealing. There is some domestic fact, which is domestic energy resource, like Zohr. It wasn't there when the strategy was developed at that time. Socioeconomic structure, there is some development took place in our socioeconomic structure. Energy service demands, as I mentioned, there is coming new sectors which is demanding electricity, like EV cars, like water desalination, like hydrogen, which I'm going to talk later. Other factor like market reform and impact of COVID-19. This is based on the local, and this is impact of COVID-19 internationally. On the national objectives, there is a development as a methodology, the way how the strategy should be developed. And there should be, from experience, the strategy over the last 5 years, we believe that there is need to develop, to include much more factors. When I talk about the comprehensive renewable energy master plan, is basically a plan which identifies where renewable energy could be found in Egypt. But it's not just a resource, because it's not a place where you have the resource is the only criteria that you should have renewable energy. There is 5 criteria. There is site constraints. So you might have a very good resource, but you have some site constraints. You need to optimize the design of your plant, because the old cramp was developed based on a standard curve for the equipment, which is underestimate basically how much energy you could recover. Also, the capacity credit, which is a factor. It's not the criteria how much you generate, but also when you will generate. If you will generate by night during the peak time, it's more valuable than generating during daytime where you have less peak. So it's not just how much, but when. Also, possibility to hybridize, to integrate different renewable energy together, have solar with wind together, working together, so you have much more stability in the supply. So how you could evaluate, a map has been developed like what looked on the right for sites which could be used for solar energy and wind energy to be developed. But we realized later that we don't have enough wind sites. And basically the wind atlas of Egypt was a little bit tricky. It shows that the Western Desert has no wind energy. Practically, this is not because the Western Desert has no energy, but they don't make measurements within the Western Desert. So they haven't put any data within the Western Desert. After analyzing the Western Desert, it has been realized that several sites has an excellent wind potential, like the highland of Mashrouq or Saloum, like West Fayoum, like West Sohag, like West Aswan, like South Al-Wahad. substantial. We talk about over 200 plus gigawatt of wind energy. Also, in the west, in the east, we have east of Sohag, we have Ras Sedr, as well as we have a Tor area. There is substantial quantities for energy, and these areas has a very good accessibility to the grid. Not only that, but we have also offshore capacities. We have within the Gulf of Suez offshore, we have in front of Hurghada offshore capacity. So this is give a kind of an abundant quantities of wind energy with a very reasonable cost. This shows that in the areas which I mentioned before, we could have prices ranging between 2.8 and levelized cost of energy between less than 3 down to, in some places, like in east of Aswan, west of Aswan, you talk about 2.5 or 2.6. So it's a very reasonable prices where you can have. Also accompanied with that, a decree has been issued that allow to go for a tip height up to 120 meters all over the country, which is allowed to harvest more energy, so having much larger rotor diameter for wind. So this is open at a full, and this shows that a potential of 226 gigawatt. Gigawatt, 1 giga is 1,000 mega. 1,000 mega is 1,000 kilowatts, so 1 million. So it's a substantial. For the offshore, yes, it's a little bit expensive. We are talking about between 8 and 7 cents per kilowatt hour, but this is could be considered like strategic reserve for us in future. Now, we have a new demanding sector. We have electric mobility. We have pumping and water treatment. We have a lot of new cultivating projects like New Delta, like Al-Uwaynat, like Sinai projects, 1.5 million Faddan, and all of them need water, so there is a lot need for water mixing between drainage water and fresh water. We need desalination for water, so substantial quantity of water is needed with a kind of, on the other side, we might suffer some kind of reduction in our supply of water. And hydrogen, green hydrogen. So for electric mobility, a model has been developed which is based on what we call it total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership, when you acquire a car, you have the cost of the car, you have the running cost of the car, which represented in maintenance and your fuel cost, along the lifetime of the car. So if a car have a total cost of ownership less, it means that you might go for this car, this could be. But this shows that the total cost of ownership for electric vehicle compared to gasoline, as they become closer to each other, it means that the electric vehicle will take a share of the gasoline car. But also, nobody will purchase an electric vehicle unless a charging facility is available. So basically, the intersection area is basically the market share of the area. A model has been built, which we call it stochastic, which is mean random, because I don't know exactly how many mileage you do every year, how many mileage you do inside the city or outside the city, because the efficiency of car is totally different. So it depends how much fuel you consume. So this is done on a random approach, and based on this, it has been realized that by 2040, with a reference scenario, we might reach 2.1 million electric cars. Actually, we have now only 2 drivers. We have exemption from custom duties, as well as we have reduced registration cost. So this is the only driver so far. So this is represent the reference scenario. So with that, we could reach 2.1 million car out of 7.8 million car by 2040. But if we applied a proactive policy like enabling low-cost finance, increasing local manufacturing or local share, which help in reducing car prices, imposing some kind of a tax on gasoline consumption, so because this is emit CO2, you could go to 3.7, which could represent close to above 40% of our car fleet by 2040. Practically, this will come without our support or without our support, because all large producers or car manufacturers in the world promise that after 2035 they no longer produce an IC car. So practically you will not able to purchase a zero car after 2035 except an electric car. This shows here that the net fuel savings due to that, if you follow the reference scenario, it will be 2 million tons of gasoline saving.
Sorry to interrupt you. If I could ask you to wrap it up, because we're 35
Yes.
minutes in.
Okay. And this shows how much electricity we will consume, and here how much, and how CO2 consumption we're going to save. This shows all varieties of water need. It includes power generation. We don't have much water supply to increase our generation from water, but we need more electricity for water pumping and mixing. We need water desalination. We need water treatment. This shows how much domestic water will be increased. So treated water will increase from 10 billion meter cube a year. We will need for domestic 15 billion. And wastewater treatment goes from 8 to 12. So substantial quantities of water will be needed in the future. This shows the plan up to 2050 for water desalination for domestic water use, which will reach around 3 billion meter cube. So substantial quantity of energy will be needed for that. And this is how the strategy should be developed. So practically in the 2035 strategy was based on the Times model, which is a long-term projection model, a least cost economic equilibrium model. But basically, as they usually say, that energy strategy shouldn't be left to energy people. Energy strategy has an impact on the macroeconomy, so it should be tested according to a CGE model, for example, to find the impact of the energy strategy on the employment, in the competitiveness of the economy, and the exchange rate, and the exports of Egypt. So it's very much. Also on the short term, because sometimes on the short term, some operational constraint could restrict achieving this long-term target. So it should be tested also on this short term. This shows the reference scenario, which shows that we could reach a kind of close to 70% of our electricity mix coming from renewable. If we added the nuclear, so we will reach 77% of non-hydrocarbon electricity by 2040. This is a mix how it will be developed. This is how capacities of plant will be developed between 2017, which is a reference year, up to 2040, how much we will generate from each supply source. And this is the short-term analysis, which hour by hour, which shows that how much the system will react. Is the units could work together, or there will be sometimes the unit couldn't match the changes in the supply. So this is how the system, so this is for the fourth season, September, December 4, as example for the months. And this shows what we call it an asset management plan. This is all plans we have so far. The red, it means that this plant should be expired. The blue is this plant is staying with us, and the other is plants which already has been, black is plants which is being decommissioned, which means that this is how we could manage our existing and future assets. And this is for hydrogen, final, which shows that hydrogen could be generated green from electrolyzer. It could be liquefied, and then it could be transmitted as a liquefied. It could be in a pipeline. It could be electricity, and then you generate on site. But by the end, you will find that either hydrogen could be used in a fuel cell in vehicles, or either hydrogen could be like a feedstock for the industry, or it could be exported, or it could be used for electricity. So what will be the future? This is a best projection for prices over the coming 20 years. We resort to an international consultant to develop. The green line, the light green and dark green are prices of the green hydrogen. The red line is the prices of natural gas. The dotted one is the lowest limit and the solid one is the upper limit. It shows that the green hydrogen will be lower than the natural gas price after 2040, so around 2045. So there will be no chance to replace directly natural gas with green hydrogen. Yet, the gray hydrogen, which is the gray line which is extended, shows that the green hydrogen will be below the cost of the gray hydrogen, which is currently being used in ammonia production, in petrochemicals, in oil refineries, and as well, and in methanol industry around 2030, less than 2035. So there is a chance to replace around 30% of our gas consumption, which is being used to produce gray hydrogen, by green hydrogen after 2035. The question which was before, how much we could export. This is one of the very important questions and still holds mystery. Conclusion, the main driver of transition is the SDGs. Also, ranking details of the driver of transmission may be different from one country to another, yet sure it includes a transition. Yeah, it's a mix which decarbonization, digitalization, or diversification, who comes first, is usually might be different from one country and maybe different from one stage to another, like what's happening in Europe. But by the end, it's the same elements. And then I will go tell that the energy strategy of Egypt is progressively have a higher share of renewable, more electrification, more stability for energy prices as a higher share of renewable is being introduced, higher regional integration, and less hydrocarbon dependency, and more friendly energy sector. So this is fit well with the energy transition requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hafez, for this very rich presentation, combining both the technical and the economic aspects of the energy picture in Egypt. We're past 8 o'clock, which is the end time, but do we have a moment to get? Okay. We can? Okay. If there are any questions from the audience, I would like, if that's okay with everyone, I'd like to give it a chance because we had promised to do that. So maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience, if there are any. That's the gentleman back there.
جهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء ده يعني دوره ايه؟ فائدته ايه؟ يعني ايه دخله بالكهرباء في مصر يعني؟ يعني اسعار بتزيد بلا ليميت. تدخله في الشبكه الكهربائيه الموحده، الشيرنج بتاع السولار انرجي في مصالح معينه لبعض الجهات ان السولار ما يشاركش، لان في ناس بتستنفع من الكهرباء الكونفنشنال.
هل في دور لجهاز التنظيم مرفق تنظيم؟
نسمع راي حضراتكم يعني.
طيب انا هستاذن حضرتك ان احنا هناخد سؤال او 2 كمان وبعدين ندي فرصه للضيوف للرد عليهم. اتفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نشكر المنصه الكريمه والناس الافاضل اللي موجوده. انا المستشار ثروت طنطاوي، وكيل اول وزاره الاستثمار سابقا، واساسا كهرباء قوه. يعني العمليه هنا لازم يحصل فيها نوع من منع الاهدار بجميع انواعه. يعني عندنا مثلا الكهرباء مثلا اسفاف غير عادي في الاستخدام، والاستخدام ده انا بارجو الدكتور السبكي والدكتور حافظ انهم يوصلوا الكلام دون للهيئه السياسيه، القياده السياسيه، مش للمصالح. القياده السياسيه هي اللي تنظم الاسفاف في استخدام الكهرباء بطريقه غير عاديه. ما فيش بلد الارصفه بتنور يا فندم. الارصفه ليه؟ ناهيك عن استهلاك الكهرباء. عمليه التوصيلات الكهربيه تحت الارض دي، تحت الارصفه، مكلفه جدا، في الجهات الحكوميه.
تمام، شكرا يا فندم. يعني السؤال عن الاسراف الشديد في
اسراف
استهلاك
شديد.
الكهرباء.
وعندك مثلا وانا جاي مثلا دلوقتي كوبري 6 اكتوبر، مركز شباب الجزيره، الملاعب منوره، ما فيش حد بيلعب.
تمام.
الكشاف الواحد، وسيادتكم ادرى طبعا اللي يفتح ملك في المدينه، الكشاف الواحد ينور عماره، وفي الاخر تتعمل محطات قوه كهربيه ويقولوا للراجل اللي قاعد على لمبه نيون في بيته رشد.
تمام، شكرا سياده المستشار. سؤال، يعني اخر سؤال معلش من استاذ هناك.
السؤال موجه للمحاضر الثالث. انت حضرتك حطيت لنا خريطة مصر ووزعت عليها المحطات. كان فيه محطات باللون الأحمر ومحطات باللون الأخضر، وفي حاجات كده كانت رمادي، أفتكر دي محطات الرياح لأن كان باين عليها الويند. إيه الأبريفيشن بتاع الأحمر وإيه الأخضر، وليه كلها جاية في الصحراء الغربية؟ يعني أنا شايف إن أنتم موزعينها كلها في الويست ريجون.
طيب
كمان حضرتك ما ذكرتش
شكرا.
محطة الزعفرانة. في لنا محطة كبيرة قوي للرياح في الزعفرانة، وهي أظن أوف شور.
شكرا جزيلا.
كمان في برج العرب كان في محطة رياح كانوا عايزين يعملوها عشان الرئيس حسني مبارك، وبعدين لما جينا ننفذها التقينا إن الويند سبيد أقل من 30 كيلو، فما عرفناش نحققها في المنطقه دي. شكرا يا فندم.
شكرا جزيلا يا فندم. معلش كان في سؤال اخير هنا. طيب اتفضل.
كنت عايز اسال عن سؤال، هل نحتاج لمزيد من التشريعات لضبط عمليه الاستثمار في انتاج الطاقه الخضراء، الهيدروجين الاخضر او رياح، خاصه ان احنا الدستور ما اشارش صراحه الا في 2014 واول قانون كان في 2015. هل احنا محتاجين تشريع معين عشان يظبط عمليه الاستثمار فيما يخص القطاع الخاص ويبقى ليه عائد على الدوله، ولا هناخد يعني انا اسف هناخد الموضه في الاستثمار وما يكونش في عائد على الدوله يعني؟ شكرا.
شكرا جزيلا. انا يعني ساترك المجال للساده المتحدثين للاجابه عن هذه الاسئله، ولو ليا ان انا هضيف سؤال من عندي كمان، وهو عن مدى وجود العداله في، يعني مدى كون مساله العداله من العناصر التي يتم وضعها في الحسبان عند رسم الاستراتيجيات، عداله توزيع الاعباء. يعني في تركيز دايما على التحول الى الطاقه النظيفه الى اخره. هل احنا في مرحله كمان محتاجين نفكر فيها عن عداله هذا التوزيع، ولا احنا في مرحله مبكره اصلا محتاجين يبقى التركيز الاولويه تماما للتحول للطاقه النظيفه؟ فانا هترك الاجابه او المجال للساده. هبدا من اليمين، دكتور سبكي، يعني من الإجابة على أسئلة الجمهور، والسؤال ده إذا كان فيه.
حضراتكم حاجة يعني جهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء هو طالما إن اتنقلنا من ممكن أقف كده، طالما إن إحنا اتنقلنا من سوق للكهرباء مملوك للدولة إلى وجود عناصر غير مملوكة للدولة إنما هي مملوكة لمستثمرين وطنيين أو خارجيين، فمحتاجين إن يحصل تنافس. التنافس ده غرضه إن يوصل الحاجة للمشترك النهائي بجودة عالية وبسعر في سعر تنافسي. فجهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء أساساً الحاجة الأساسية اللي فيه واللي صدرت سنة 1997 بأول قرار جمهوري في هذا الوقت، إنه نص على إن الجهاز دوره الرئيسي عدم وجود أي احتكار في السوق. كان هناك احتكار للدولة، ماشيين بالتدريج للانتقال من هذا الاحتكار إلى شكل تنافسي. فبالتالي ده الدور الرئيسي للجهاز. حضرتك برضو ذكرت أسعار الكهرباء. أسعار الكهرباء لفترة طويلة بالذات من 2005 من 1995 حتى 2005 ما كانش فيها ما يسمى الدعم. كانت بتغطي تكاليفها. بعد كده ابتدت التكاليف تزداد نتيجة زيادة سعر الوقود وزيادة تكاليف الاستثمارات، فانتقلت هذه، فالتكلفة ديت ابتدت تزيد على شركات الكهرباء. في نفس الوقت الدولة قالت والله أنا مش عايزة أزود على المشترك النهائي السعر بتاع الكهرباء، فابتدى يحصل نوع من نوع من الخسارة المادية للشركات المملوكة للدولة. في نفس الوقت يجي بقى دور جهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء، يقول للشركات المملوكة للدولة دي، وده إلى حد ما بيحصل، لما بتقولوا تكاليفكم هل في زيادة في الاستثمار؟ هل أنتوا بتصرفوا بطريقة غير مرشدة ولا؟ فهنا ده دور الجهاز. في نفس الوقت يجب أن احنا نجابه أن على المستوى العام كان هناك دعم من سنتين حتى يومنا هذا، ومن صدور من ساعة صدور قانون الكهرباء في 2015 ذكر أن شركات الكهرباء هتقول المتوسط بتاع التكاليف بتاعتها، وأي زيادة في الأعباء تتولى وزارة المالية أو اللي هي الحكومة، تمثل الحكومة دفع هذه الزيادة في التكاليف إلى شركات الكهرباء المتعثرة. آخر سنتين أو 3 سنوات ميزانية الدولة لم تظهر أي دفع، أي فلوس من وزارة المالية لقطاع الكهرباء، وده معناه إن في المتوسط شركات الكهرباء النهاردة بتغطي التكلفة بتاعتها. بس حاجة أقول لحضرتك في حاجة بقى اسمها إيه؟ التكلفة ده جزء، والتسعير ده حاجة تانية. بمعنى إن لما أجي أسعر مثلا للمنازل أو المحلات التجارية، التسعير اللي موجود في مصر، التسعير الحالي هو تسعير تصاعدي، كلما زاد استخدامي للكهرباء كلما زاد متوسط الرقم اللي أنا بدفعه. ده عشان يحاول يشجع ترشيد استخدام الطاقة، وإن احنا ما نستعملهاش بصورة غير مرشدة. حضرتك في الثمانينات كان عندنا تعريفة كهربية متناقصة، وكانت بتطبق على الأنشطة الصناعية، وده كان الغرض منه. إنما كلما زاد استخدامي للكهرباء كلما انخفض متوسط سعر الكهرباء. هذا اللي حصل في الثمانينات كان سلاح ذو حدين. المصانع ابتدت تبني خطوط إنتاج جديدة وتزود ساعات الإنتاج وكده، فده كان حاجة كويسة. الحاجة اللي مش كويسة اللي حصلت إن أصحاب المصانع اشتروا مصانع مستعملة. هذه المصانع المستعملة غير مرشدة للطاقة، ابتدى يستورد من دول مختلفة خاصة من إيطاليا. كان يروح طقم المهندسين والفنيين يقعد شهر في ألمانيا، شهر في إيطاليا، يتفرج على المصنع، يفهموا كويس، يفكوا بنفسهم ويجيبوه مصر تاني يركب. فده كان لازم يحصل عندنا في هذا الوقت، إن يصدر قرارات أو تشريعات. التشريعات مهمة جدا، إن هذه التشريعات تخاطب ترشيد استخدام الطاقة، وتخاطب الاستخدام النهائي للطاقة الكهربائية. جهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء في الوضع الحالي هو اللي على فكرة بيحسب التعريفة الكهربائية، هو اللي بيحسب وبيضمن إن الشركات العاملة، النهاردة في مصر فوق احنا قلنا 6 شركات إنتاج و9 شركات توزيع، بالإضافة إلى 3 شركات إنتاج آخرين مملوكين للدولة. وصل عدد الشركات المرخصة لتقديم الخدمة الكهربائية 68 شركة. فيمكن النسبة ما بينهم، الشركات اللي في القطاع الخاص مش بنفس الكم الكبير اللي بتحوز عليه الشركات المملوكة للدولة، إنما الغرض إن هذه الشركات تتنافس مع بعضها. والحاجة الجميلة بقى برضو هنا جميلة، ويعني في بعض الأحيان برضو تخيف بعض الشيء، إن جهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء لما طلع التعريفة الكهربائية الأخيرة سنة أظن 2020 أصدر قال التعريفة الكهربائية لمدة ال5 سنين الجاية لحد 2025 آدي الأرقام بتاعتها. فكل واحد فينا كل مستخدم منزلي مستخدم صناعي يقدر يقدر الأسعار بتاعته أو التكاليف بتاعته الفعلية. هنا برضو بس يعني هحط خطين تحت كلمة كده، قال لك طبقا لسعر الصرف وطبقا لسعر الوقود اللي احنا بنلاقي النهارده. يعني الحسابات بتاعه التعريفه ديت كانت معموله على سعر تحويل اللي صدرت 2020 او 2019 كانت على حساب سعر صرف 16 جنيه للدولار الامريكي. النهارده لما بنتكلم على ما يقرب من ال 20 جنيه دي حاجه مختلفه. محطوطه ايضا على سعر وقود ولحد النهارده هو ثابت بل نقص 3 دولار، كان 3 دولار وربع للمليون وحده بريطانيه، بقاله سنه شويه عند 3 دولار للمليون وحده بريطانيه. حتى اسعار الغاز اللي صدرت امبارح يوم 9 اكتوبر لم تمس اسعار الغاز الطبيعي لمحطات الكهرباء. فهنا دور جهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء ان هو يمنع الاحتكار ويمنع يعني يمنع اي نوع من الاحتكار اللي في السوق، ويوصل الى علاقه عادله ما بين المشتركين والمستخدمين النهائيين. وبيبص طبعا في اي منازعات بتحصل في هذا في قسم في جهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء اسمه فض المنازعات اللي بتحصل هذا. انما يجب ان احنا نعرف ان
بس بنتابع لوزاره الكهرباء.
لا انا ملاحظات حضرتك هقول لحضرتك ملاحظه حضرتك في محلها ويمكن في العرض اللي انا عملته لما اختفى المستطيل الاصفر اللي فضل هو الوزاره، بقت وزاره فقط وليست وزاره وشركه قابضه، وجهاز تنظيم مرفق الكهرباء اللي هو مثلته ساعتها بالعين حورس، اللي هو عين هتحرس العلاقه ما بين المستخدمين النهائيين وشركات الكهرباء المقدمه للخدمه. ده هو بطيء بعض الشيء، التحول التشريعي بطيء بعض الشيء. لما قلت 8 سنوات من سنه 2015 صدر السنه اللي فاتت تمديد 3 سنوات اخرى، فكاننا لسه مش قادرين نوصل للسوق التنافسي. في حاجه تانية حضراتكم اشرتوها الى اللي ما يسمى ترشيد الطاقه او الانرجي افيشنسي. الانرجي افيشنسي في الواقع مش مفروض ابدا نتكلم على طاقات متجدده من غير ما نتكلم على انرجي افيشنسي. دولت الاثنين يعني تكلفتنا لكل 1 ميجا وات او ميجا وات اور في الانرجي افيشنسي ارخص بكثير من التكلفه بتاعه استثمار جديد نضيف. فده يجب ان هو يكون موجود. قانون الكهرباء في الماده 42 و43 منه، اذا كنت انا صح يا دكتور حافظ، 42 45 حاجه كده، اشار الى اهميه ترشيد استخدام الطاقه ووجود ما يسمى مراقبين للطاقه في الانشطه الصناعيه. الحاجه برضو اللي حضراتكم يعني ذكرتوها كده ضمنا الاستراتيجيه اللي احنا بنتكلم عليها والارقام الجذابه اللي احنا بنتكلم عليها. احنا بنتكلم على رقم يمكن حضراتكم شفتوا في التشارت اللي حاططها الدكتور حافظ، فيها سنوات، فيها تايم بلان. التايم بلان ده يجب ان احنا نتبعه. يعني هنقول مثلا ان احنا زودنا قدرات طاقه متجدده قد ايه على مرحله الكذا سنه اللي فاتوا، نلاقيها متذبذبه كقدرات. يعني بمعنى اصح ان التايم بلان بتاعنا ده او الخطه الزمنيه ديت محتاجين يعني ننظر لها بدقة أكتر. هنعلن إيه المشاريع اللي هنعلن عنها، إيه المشاريع اللي هتنفذ. اللي حضرتك برضو أشرت ليه إن الطاقات المتجددة بالذات للمشاريع المايكرو والصغيرة والمتوسطة الحجم، الطاقات المتجددة بتجابه بعض الصعوبات حاليا، بتجابه صعوبات من ما يسمى مقابل الإدماج. يعني دي حاجة بيتم التفاوض فيها حاليا. بيجابه حاجة تانية ماشية على البلد كلها، إتاحة العملة الأجنبية عشان يقدروا يستوردوا معدات وقوانين الاستيراد. فدي حاجات يعني كويس ان حضراتكم اشرتوا لها.
دكتور محمد ممكن اتفضل حضرتك عندك نقطة أخيرة وننتقل
لا ده أنا هاممني جدا، بس حكاية إن التوقيتات الزمنية ديت نحطها في الاعتبار، فدي حاجة ضرورية جدا جدا. وإلا هنفضل نقول استراتيجية ب 42% 70% and so on، واحنا مش عارفين هنوصل هناك ازاي. فده محتاجين يبقى واضح قدام الجميع.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور محمد. احنا للاسف الوقت طبعا هو اللي حاكمنا، لكن دكتور امين ودكتور حافظ اذا كنتوا في عجاله في دقائق حابين تردوا على الاسئله اللي طرحت، او لو في تعليقات ختاميه. دكتور امين نبدا بحضرتك.
I'll try to be as fast as possible. In all the recent lectures I have given here and there, and all what I have written in LinkedIn, for instance, I always said, this is just to come to help my friend, that you throw the clocks and you throw the calendar and you have solved all your problems. يعني احنا عندنا في المغرب مثل يقول السمعة طاحت علقوا الحجام. يعني لو كان مشكل في اليومية والساعة احنا كلنا بخير، كله تمام. We have really problems with this thing in all the Arab countries. We are sick with this. Our enemy is not always where we think. It's not on not respecting the time and the programming without reasons. And really, this is something I don't understand, because most Arab countries are dominantly Muslim. And we have a huge idea what time means. 5 times a day, Ramadan once a year, this and that. We have an exact idea what timing means, okay? 5 times a year, a day, we remember that if we do it in that time, it will be ada, otherwise it will be qada, otherwise you are not there. And how come population like this, in majority Muslim and in majority respecting timing with God, is forgetting his timing with human being? I don't understand. This is absolutely not an engineering comment. It is a human comment. Thank you.
شكرا دكتور امين. دكتور حافظ.
هو عندي بس كومنت سريعه. فيرست بالنسبه للجهاز، جهاز مش تابع وزاره الكهرباء، الجهاز وفق القانون هو جهه هيئه مستقله ولا يتبع الوزير. صحيح الوزير يرأس مجلس اداره الجهاز، وده جايه من حته قانونيه تكنيكال ان لابد ان يمثل اي جهه في الدوله، هيئه عامه في الدوله، امام مجلس النواب. فالمسؤول يا اما كان رئيس الجهاز هو من يمثله قدام مجلس النواب، وده ما تاخذ به بعض الدول، او ان يمثله شخص دستوريا مسؤول بالتمثيل قدام. انما هو صوته في مجلس اداره الجهاز صوت. ما انكرش ان الوزير له ثقل في ساعات الضغط في اتجاهات، انما كثيرا جدا بعض القرارات ان ما اقدرش اقول ان في قرار بيصدر على غير رغبة الوزير، انما مش كل القرارات اللي الوزير بيعوزها بيوافق عليها. انما this is a learning curve by the way and it's a learning curve all around the world. يعني فكرة الهيئات المستقلة، الدولة كانت بتتولى هي الإنتاج والنقل والتوزيع والبيع وكل حاجة، أن يكون هناك هيئة، هذه الهيئة بتكون مسؤولة عن أن هي تراقب. ده learning curve الدولة بتتعمل. بلس أن في دايما لازم ناخد بالنا أن في لوبيز. It's not that simple and straightforward. في لوبي للمنتجين التقليديين ممثلين في الشركات بيضغطوا بطريقة. للأسف ما زال عندنا اللوبي من الناحية الثانية وهو المستهلكين ضعيف جدا، وما بيقدر، هو بيشتكي انما it doesn't lobby. في هيئات زي اتحاد الصناعات، زي اتحاد الغرف التجارية، ما زالت لسه ضعيفة في انها تلوبي لمصالحها. اتحاد المنتجين فلغاية ما يحدث هذا نوع من التوازن والليرنينج كيرف هنوصل الى المستوى. انما it's a learning curve and much better than before but less than we hope. ده اللي اقدر اقوله في موضوع الجهاز. موضوع ترشيد الطاقة، الاساس في ترشيد الطاقة you should send the right price signal. السعر الحقيقي للطاقة. لو اديت طاقة باقل من سعرها هيحصل اهدارها. لان احنا مرة في دراسة عملناها في ترشيد الطاقة، لما واحد بيروح يشتري ثلاجة، ايه استهلاك الثلاجة دي من الكهرباء نمرة كام في ترتيب اولوياته عن لما يختار الثلاجة؟ نمرة 12. ليه؟ لان كان نمرة 1 عنده سعر الثلاجة، هي ديفروست ولا مش ديفروست، لونها ايه، باب ولا بابين، ماركتها ايه، انتاج اني دولة. الكهرباء تيجي نمرة 12 في الاهتمامات. لما سعر الكهرباء اتغير اصبحت طلعت نمرة 6 من الاهتمام. وادي حضراتكم مثال ان القطاع المنزلي في مصر كان معدل الزيادة بتاعته 8%. نتيجة لتغيير تعريفة الكهرباء وصل معدل الزيادة بتاعه 0 ونقص في سنة من السنين. مش لأن استهلاكه الكهرباء قل، بس نتيجة لأن اتجه لوسائل ترشيد. فبعد ما كان عندنا ما لا يزيد عن 25 مليون لمبة ليد، عندنا 200 مليون لمبة ليد بيتباعوا في الماركت. ليه؟ لأن بقت اقتصادي to acquire energy efficient equipment. وعشان كده الاستراتيجية لما جت قالت if we do not do anything هنرشد 8%، لأن التكنولوجي بتتوفر. حضرتك رحت اشتريت ثلاجة النهاردة، مؤكد هي بتستهلك أقل من ثلاجة قديمة، بس ده replacement. But if you become proactive you can save 18%. فالبروأكتيفيتي ديت هي اللي بتيجي عن طريق التسعير نمرة 1، إتاحة المعدات المرشدة، التوعية اللي ممكن إن هي تكون موجودة، التدريب بالذات في الصناعة وما إلى ذلك لسوق الاستهلاك. فده بالنسبة لموضوع الترشيد. بالنسبة لموضوع الاستثمار، قانون اللي هو 203 2014 هو بتاع الطاقة المتجددة، وكان اسمه ايه؟ قانون تشجيع الاستثمار في الطاقات المتجددة. فهو براكتيكالي بيجي اونلاين، بس تشجيع الاستثمار اتس نوت جاست قانون، هي خلق مناخ جاذب للاستثمارات، وده له كرايتيرياس كتيرة جدا، وده اللي بيشتغل جزء منه عليه الجهاز، لأن في إدراك أن security of supply مرتبط بحجم تدفق استثمارات. احنا لما بنتكلم في الخطط اللي احنا اتكلمنا عليها بنتكلم على استثمارات تتجاوز 120 مليار دولار مطلوبة دلوقتي في 18 سنة، يعني بنتكلم قرابة 8 مليار دولار كل سنة استثمارات. مفيش الدولة ما تقدرش توفرها، فبالتالي لابد أن يكون هناك ترشيد لمجال الاستثمار. أيضا لما موضوع الاستراتيجية اتس ا رود ماب، وعشان كده أنا كنت حريص في الأول أن أشرح الانستتيوشنال سيت اب بتاع قطاع الطاقة في مصر. الاستراتيجية بتوضع، إنما الاستراتيجية ما يكملها هي policies، ما يكملها هي خطط، ما يكملها هي regulations. إذا ما عملتش ده كله مع الاستراتيجية you will not achieve anything. It's just بتبقى wish list الاستراتيجية، إنما it's a road map بتقول لك this is feasible, this is the least cost. بس أنت لازم تحط خطط، لازم تحط policies، وبتقول لك إيه هي البوليسيز اللي يعني هتلاقي في الاستراتيجية نص كتاب الاستراتيجية وهي which are the policies and measures the government should take into consideration to achieve هذه الاستراتيجية. If it doesn't been taken مفيش حاجة هتتحقق. فبالتالي بس إذا ما كانش موجود الويش ليست بتاعي أو الرود ماب بتاعي هعمل بوليسيز إزاي؟ ممكن تطلع بوليسيز contradicted، ممكن تطلع بوليسي ما تؤديش إلى أي حاجة. فالاستراتيجية it's necessary but not enough. ده الكلام. العدالة بقى في موضوع توزيع الأعباء، دايما العدالة هي نوع من أو عدم التمييز وتوزيع الأعباء هي جزء من الفكرة. وعشان كده في جزء من دايما اللي بيراعى مثلا في تعريفة الكهرباء أن تكون موحدة. كتير جدا من الدول يقول لك والله في مناطق أعمل عليها تعريفة أعلى وفي مناطق أعمل عليها تعريفة أقل من الحدث. ممكن، ولكن فكرة عدم التمييز بين المستهلكين اللي متماثلين في مركز قانوني واحد. وعشان كده لما جاء إعادة هيكلة التعريفة كان زمان يقول لك صناعة الحديد والصلب لها تعريفة، صناعة الأسمنت لها تعريفة، صناعة الكهرباء قالت والله إيه الكرايتيريا؟ أو أنت عميل مربوط على أني جهد. الكهرباء ليست شريك للمستهلك فيما يفعله بالكهرباء، هي عندها كهرباء بتنتجها بتكلفها بتبيعها بالسعر يعوض التكلفة، إنما ليست شريك لحضرتك. لو كسبت أكتر في الكهرباء أخد منك دي أحد طرق التسعير بيسموها النت باك، بس ما هياش فير. فبالتالي ده كان جزء من اللي حطه الجهاز في البتاع. لما التعريفة اتغيرت وأضيف فيها التايم اوف يوز مثلا وأضيف فيها البيك ديماند تبقى 2 بارت تاريفز، معناها إن نمطك في الاستهلاك اللي بيكلف أكتر هيخلي متوسط تكلفتك أعلى من كاستمر لو نمطه في الاستهلاك بيكلف الشبكة أقل. عدالة في توزيع الأعباء. فهي التسعير دايما بيراعى. أيضا دراسة التعريفة بيصاحبها دايما ما نسميه دراسة الافوردابيلتي، قدرة المستهلكين على السداد. وإلا ودي مبنية على تقرير بيصدره الجهاز المركزي للتعبئة العامة والإحصاء اسمه تقرير الدخل والإنفاق. فبس طبعا احنا كان تكلفة الكهرباء 1.7 في الحضر و1.8% من الإنفاق قبل كده. حاليا التارجت ان هي لا تتجاوز 4% من الانفاق. بس definitely me as a customer هو نفس الكيلو وات ساعة هدفع فيه أكتر وأدفع فيه أقل. I will not be happy إن أنا بس الناس أدركت إن it's not a matter of price, it's a matter also of availability of the service. إذا الشركة تعثرت هينتهي الأمر إنها هتقطع الكهرباء. وما يشير لأن لما كنا بنتكلم على accessibility to electricity الحقيقة كنا بنعمل 3 كرايتيريا. واحدة منهم أشار إليها الدكتور أمين أو 2. الكهرباء الشبكة موجودة ولا غير موجودة؟ ده نمرة 1. ممكن تكون الشبكة موجودة بس ممكن تكون الكهرباء غالية جدا بحيث مش قادر أتعاقد وأخد الكهرباء اللي أن أنا أحصل عليها. أو ممكن الشبكة موجودة بس الكهرباء ما بتجيش، مقطوعة. في لبنان الكهرباء مقطوعة على الأقل ما بين 20 ساعة و12 ساعة في اليوم. في شبكة وفي وصل الكهرباء في البيت بس ما فيش كهرباء لأن متعثر جدا نظام الكهرباء. فإذا الأكسسبيليتي اتس نوت كام بيت وصل له وصلة كهرباء، كام بيت يقدر يدفع الكهرباء، كام بيت. وعشان كده الافوردابيلتي ستادي ودي من الكرايتيريا اللي الجهاز حطها في الاعتبار وعملها. لما بشيل الدعم مش هشيله في سنة، مش هشيله في قد إيه علشان ما يحصلش إن أخل بقدرة المستهلكين على السداد. ده جزء من الكرايتيريا، وإلا هيبتدي يلجأوا لسرقة الكهرباء مثلا حاجة. وبالتالي زي ما بيقولوا طمعان جبنال ويت فلسنج سكيلو فيه، إن الكهرباء زودت الأسعار انتهى إن الحصيلة قلت لأن الناس سرقت الكهرباء. السيمبل. شكرا.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور. دكتور Amin, you have a quick remark to make?
Yes, I just wanted to add something. I think that myself, I have been 45 years, about 45 years defending socialist ideas. But even though for fares, prices, I don't like subsidies. I will tell you why I came to this. In Morocco, there were 4 products or family of products subsidized. To do bread. Not the bread, the طحينة. دقيق نوع من الدقيق إنتاج محلي flour. Thank you. المحروقات النفطية السائل والغاز بوتين بروبين نو هذا السكر. هذا مديرية التخطيط قامت بدراسة مهمة في أوائل السنوات الأخيرة ال10 سنوات الأخيرة، وقسمت على 5 المغاربة: الخمس ذو الدخل منخفض، والخمس الثاني والثالث والرابع والخامس. ثم بحثت كل واحد ده بحث تم على 65,000 أسرة، يعني مش قليلة، يعني كلها موزعة على المغرب كله. واكتشفوا بأن منتوج بمنتوج دائما الغني مستفيد من هذا الدعم أكثر من الآخرين، لأن الغني وأما عنده السيارة اللي بتستهلك محروقات، وأما بيأكل حلويات أكثر من الفقير، هذا يجعله يأكل سكر أكثر، وأما يتم تبديل في الخبز وبيستهلك أكثر خبز من الفقير. وأخيرا، ما هو المهم؟ هل أن ندعم المواطن أم أن نسحب كل ميزانيات الدعم؟ ومثلا المغرب في إمكانه لأن كل ما فيش سنة بينزل كميات الدعم أقل من 15 مليار درهم، وصدفة أن عندنا في المغرب ما يقرب من 12 مليون، بين 12 مليون و15 مليون نسمة تستحق مساعدة. يعني ممكن المغرب يعطي $1000 درهم، يعني $100 لكل شخص فقير، ونسحب كل الدعمات. يعني الأسر الفقيرة عادة كثيرة، فيها 6 7 8 أشخاص، هذا ممكن له يأخذ مساعدة مباشرة وليس دعم، مساعدة مباشرة تقرب بين $600 و$800 سنويا، ستساعده أن يعوض الدعم اللي فشل. وبطبيعة الحال الأستاذ بنونة ما يبقاش مدعم، الأستاذ بنونة حيؤدي التكلفة الكاملة، لأن الأستاذ بنونة عنده الكافي مشان ما يؤديش ما يساعدوش في الدعم تاع الدقيق ولا هذا. أخيرا بعد هذه الدراسة هذه سحب على هذا السوبر، بعد ذلك على الديزل، وحاليا لسه ما عندناش حكومة شجاعة الكافية مشان تسحب الدعم من البوتين، لأن صارنا تاريخ سياسي أن حاولوا سحب الدعم من البوتاغاز، وكانت غادي تكون انتفاضات في المغرب، والحكومة رجعت للوراء للأسف.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور أمين. يعني لم يتبقى إلا أن أشكر السادة الحضور والذين تابعونا كذلك على فيسبوك، وجزيل الشكر موصول للسادة الضيوف دكتور محمد السبكي والدكتور أمين بنونة والدكتور حافظ السلماوي. شكرا جزيلا لكم على يعني هذه الكلمات الثرية للغاية في رسم مشهد التحول إلى الطاقة المتجددة في كل من مصر والمغرب. وشكرا لحضراتكم المتابعة، وإلى اللقاء الآخر. شكرا.